He humiliated her in public, and her answer left the whole restaurant speechless. You ever been in a place where the entire mood changes the second someone walks through the door? That's exactly what happened inside the Grove, an upscale restaurant sitting in the heart of Scottsdale, Arizona. It's the kind of spot where the cheapest bottle of wine costs more than most people's rent. The lighting was warm, the silverware polished so well you could see your reflection, and the air smelled like money, literally. That evening started out like any other Thursday night, couples talking softly over steak, a group of executives laughing a little too loudly near the bar, the piano player working his magic in the corner. Everything was smooth, until the front doors opened. Victor Langston walked in. Now, let me tell you something about Victor. The man didn't just enter a room, he took it. 6'2", expensive suit hugging his frame like it was crafted by angels, and a wristwatch that could pay off someone's mortgage twice. His presence carried weight, the kind that makes people straighten their backs without even realizing it. The hostess, poor girl, nearly dropped her iPad when she saw him. "Good evening, Mr. Langston," she stammered, her voice trembling like the last leaf on a tree in December. Victor didn't smile. He didn't need to. "Table for two, quiet corner," he said, each word clipped like he didn't have time for vowels. And that's when the whispers started. "That's Victor Langston." "You mean the tech guy? The one worth, what, 4 or 5 billion? The staff scrambled like ants after someone kicked the hill. The maitre d' practically sprinted to prepare the best table. They didn't just pull out chairs, they polished them again, just in case a speck of dust had the audacity to exist. When Victor sat down, he didn't look around. He didn't need to. The world looked at him. His wife, Camille, followed behind. Elegant, blonde waves cascading over her shoulders, a pearl necklace resting perfectly on her collarbone. She was the kind of woman who could silence a room with a glance, and yet, next to Victor, she seemed almost invisible. They sat. Menus appeared faster than magic. Water poured before they even asked. And that's when she walked over. Danielle Brooks. Now, Danielle wasn't just any waitress. She had this calm energy about her, like she'd seen the worst storms and still found a way to smile. Brown skin, glowing under the soft lights, natural curls pulled into a neat puff, eyes warm but sharp, like they noticed everything. "Good evening," she said softly, with the kind of confidence that doesn't need to shout. "Welcome to the Grove. Can I get you started with something to drink?" Victor didn't even look up from the menu. "Sparkling water, cold, no lemon, and bring the wine list," he muttered. Danielle nodded, jotting it down without a flicker of irritation. If she was bothered, she didn't show it. Camille smiled politely. "I'll have a glass of the Sauvignon Blanc." "Of course," Danielle replied, her tone steady. She walked away as gracefully as she came, but even from behind, you could feel the quiet strength in her steps. And yet, at that very moment, Victor was already checking his phone, his face lit by the glow of an email that clearly wasn't good news. His jaw clenched. He typed furiously, ignoring everything else. The mood at their table? Ice cold. What no one in that restaurant knew was that Victor wasn't just here for dinner. He was here to escape. Big meeting the next morning. Hundreds of millions on the line. One bad headline could tank his company's stock. The man was a pressure cooker, and someone was about to turn the heat all the way up. Because 10 minutes later, the first crack in his perfect evening appeared. But it wasn't the food. It wasn't the service. It was something far smaller, something so simple that would light the fuse and start a chain reaction no one could stop. The clock above the bar ticked quietly, but for Victor, every second sounded like a drumbeat. His phone was still on the table, screen glowing with emails stacked like a bad hand of cards. He scrolled, eyes narrowing, deals hanging by a thread, investors breathing down his neck, and a press leak rumor spreading faster than wildfire. And then came the whisper from his wife. "Victor, can we at least enjoy dinner tonight?" Camille's voice was soft, almost pleading. He didn't look up. "Dinner's fine. Everything's fine." But the stiffness in his voice betrayed him. Danielle returned with the drinks, placing the sparkling water and wine on the table like a stagehand setting the scene. "Your wine, ma'am. Sparkling water for you, sir." She placed the bottle gently in front of Victor. He finally looked up. For a split second, their eyes met. His sharp and impatient, hers calm, almost grounding. She didn't flinch, not even when he gave a curt nod and muttered, "Thanks." "Would you like to hear the specials?" she asked. Victor shook his head. No, 2 filet mignons, medium rare, truffle mashed potatoes on the side, and bring it quickly. Danielle wrote it down, her expression neutral, but her tone polite. Certainly, sir. And for you, ma'am? Camille offered a tight smile. The halibut, please. With asparagus. Danielle nodded. I'll put that in right away. And with that, she glided back toward the kitchen, the soft click of her shoes vanishing into the hum of conversations. Victor leaned back in his chair, shoulders tense as a bowstring. Camille sipped her wine slowly, eyes darting around as if searching for a lifeline in the crowd. She hated nights like this, where her husband's ambition swallowed the man she once knew. Across the room, Danielle stood at the order station, tapping the details into the screen. Behind her, Antonio Vega, the head chef, peeked over the counter. Stocky build, salt and pepper hair, voice like gravel. VIP table? He asked, glancing at the slip. Yeah, Danielle said, sliding it over. Antonio read it and gave a low whistle. Langston, the tech guy? That's the one, Antonio grunted, tossing the ticket on the line. We'll make it perfect, but it'll take time. Fillets ain't fast food. Danielle smirked faintly. Tell him that. Back at the table, Victor's phone buzzed again. He snatched it up. One glance, and his grip tightened. Another investor pulling out. His empire, the thing he built brick by brick, felt like it was sitting on quicksand. Camille tried again, her voice gentle. Victor, you're grinding your teeth. He dropped the phone, exhaling sharply. I don't have time for this. I need things to run smoothly, just one night without someone screwing it up. But the truth? Things were about to spiral. 15 minutes passed. The wine level dropped. Victor's jaw stayed locked. The dining room felt like a stage where everyone was pretending not to notice the man radiating impatience at table 6. Danielle checked the kitchen, fillets still on the grill. She grabbed the bread basket and approached the table, hoping to keep the peace. Fresh bread for you both, she said warmly, setting it down. Victor didn't even glance at her. Where's the food? It's coming, sir. Shouldn't be much longer. He gave a dry laugh, no humor in it. Shouldn't be. That's reassuring. Danielle held his stare for a beat. Not confrontational, just steady. I understand you're in a hurry. I'll keep checking with the kitchen for you. And she walked away, calm, composed, like someone who understood storms but refused to get wet. Victor turned to Camille, shaking his head. Unbelievable. A place like this, and they can't manage a simple order. Camille opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Victor's phone lit up again. This time, he didn't even try to hide the frustration ripping through him. He slammed it on the table, hard enough for the silverware to rattle. Heads turned, whispers floated, and right then, a crack appeared in the perfect image of Victor Langston. The first sign that power means nothing when patience runs out. 25 minutes. That's how long it had been since Victor ordered. 25 minutes that felt like hours to a man used to the world bending to his schedule. He drummed his fingers against the table, each tap a warning shot. Across from him, Camille stirred her wine glass, pretending to admire the decor. She hated confrontation, but she knew the explosion was coming. Finally, Victor threw his napkin on the table. This is ridiculous. Camille glanced around nervously. Victor, please, don't make a scene. He leaned in, voice sharp, but low enough not to shout. Yet. A scene? Camille, I booked this table 3 weeks ago. We're paying a small fortune to sit here, and I can't even get a steak on time? At that exact moment, Danielle appeared, calm, collected, carrying a confidence that didn't match her black and white uniform. Sir, she began, her voice warm, the chef is finishing up your order now. I appreciate your patience. Victor cut her off, his tone like a blade. Patience? You think I have time to sit here like everyone else? Do you have any idea who I am? The restaurant fell silent. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Even the piano player missed a note. Danielle didn't flinch. Her brown eyes stayed locked on his, her posture straight as steel. I understand you're in a hurry, sir, but our kitchen takes care to— Spare me the speech, Victor snapped, his voice carrying now. Heads turned from every table. I run a company that makes more in a day than this place does in a year. When I ask for a steak, I expect a steak, not excuses. Camille closed her eyes briefly, embarrassment painting her cheeks. She whispered, Victor, please. He ignored her. He was past the point of no return. His pride had the wheel now. Danielle took a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. I hear you, sir, but we... You hear me? Victor's laugh was sharp, ugly. Clearly you don't. Because if you did, that food would be on my table by now. You know what? Forget the steak. Bring me the manager. Now. Danielle didn't move, didn't blink. The weight of the moment settled like a stone in the room. Every guest pretended to look away, but their ears leaned in. From the kitchen, Antonio peeked through the service window, muttering under his breath. Here we go. Danielle's lips parted like she was about to speak, but Victor beat her to it again. People like you. He stopped himself, biting down hard on the rest. But the damage was done. The air around them tightened. For the first time, Danielle's calm cracked. Not into anger, but something deeper. A flicker of hurt flashed in her eyes. Then, resolve. She stepped closer, just enough for her voice to carry without shouting. Sir, I'm here to make sure you have the best experience possible. That's my job. But respect goes both ways. Victor's jaw tightened. His hands curled on the table. The muscles in his neck stood out like ropes. Camille whispered again, almost pleading, Victor, stop. But he was too far gone. His pride couldn't let him back down. Not in public. Not when everyone was watching. He leaned forward, his words like venom now. Respect? You think I owe you respect? You bring plates to tables for a living. Don't lecture me about respect. Gasps rippled through the dining room. Someone near the bar muttered, Whoa. Danielle stood there, still as a mountain, her face unreadable. But behind those eyes, something was shifting. She didn't storm off. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. Instead, she did something no one expected. She took a single step closer, her voice calm enough to send chills. Sir, may I say something? Victor sneered. What could you possibly say that matters? The room held its breath. Even the clinking of glasses stopped. Danielle drew in a quiet breath and let the words roll out, soft but steady, each one a strike of lightning. But what she said next would shatter the room like glass. Every eye in that restaurant was locked on them now. You could feel the tension pressing down like a heavy curtain. Even the piano player quietly closed the lid of his instrument, deciding this wasn't the time for background music. Danielle's voice came again, soft enough to sound polite, firm enough to demand attention. Sir, may I say something? Victor leaned back, his expression sharp, a smug smile tugging at his lips like a man who believed he'd already won. Go ahead, he said, waving a dismissive hand. Amuse me. Danielle nodded slightly, as if thanking him for permission. Then with the calm of someone who wasn't afraid, she said it. Sir, I serve tables, so people like you remember what it's like to be human. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was barely more than a whisper. But those words hit harder than a shout. The dining room froze. Forks hovered in midair. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. Victor blinked, the smugness draining from his face like water slipping down a drain. For the first time all night, he looked uncertain. What? His voice cracked, the confidence wobbling just enough for people to hear. Danielle didn't flinch. She didn't repeat herself either. She let the sentence hang in the air like a challenge no one could ignore. Camille stared at her husband, her face a mixture of shock and something else. Hope, maybe, or relief that someone had finally said what she never dared to. Around them, whispers started to ripple through the room. Did she just... Oh my God. She said that to him? Victor's fingers tightened around the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. He opened his mouth, ready to throw back something sharp, something cruel. Except nothing came. For the first time tonight, words failed him. Danielle took a small step back, her expression neutral, but her eyes steady as stone. Your food will be out shortly, she said softly, then turned and walked away with the grace of someone who had nothing to prove. And just like that, Victor Langston, man who commanded boardrooms and headlines, sat there speechless. Camille broke the silence first. Victor, her voice was almost a whisper. She's right. He turned to her, eyes wide, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard from his own wife. Excuse me? She's right, Camille said, firmer this time. Look at yourself. Look at what this pressure has turned you into. Victor's jaw clenched. He wanted to argue. He wanted to win this fight like he won every other, But deep down, something in him twisted because she wasn't wrong. He picked up his phone again, staring at the glowing screen like it held the answer to all his problems. But for the first time, those numbers and emails didn't feel like power. They felt like chains. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Antonio let out a low whistle, turning to Danielle. "You just dropped a bomb out there," he murmured. Danielle shrugged, her hands steady as she plated Camille's halibut. "Someone had to." Antonio chuckled. "You've got guts. I'll give you that." But inside, Danielle wasn't celebrating. She wasn't trying to humiliate him. She had seen that look before, the hollow desperation behind arrogance. And part of her hated how familiar it felt. Back at the table, Victor stared at his reflection in his untouched glass of water. For the first time in years, the man who always had control felt it slipping. Not because of a business deal, not because of money, but because a waitress, a woman he didn't even bother to look at properly, had reminded him of something he'd buried under titles and bank statements: humility. But the night wasn't over, and what came next would change everything. Victor sat there like someone had cut the cord that held him together. His fingers, which had been clawing at the edge of the table moments ago, loosened. He wasn't used to silence, not this kind. Normally, silence meant victory for him. In negotiations, silence was power, but right now, silence felt like exposure. Across from him, Camille studied her husband's face. She saw the cracks. The same man who once drove across 3 states just to surprise her with flowers was buried under years of deadlines, stock prices, and status. And for the first time in months, she wondered if that man still existed. The whispers in the dining room hadn't stopped. Some were trying to act like nothing happened, but curiosity hung thick in the air like perfume. Near the bar, a man whispered to his date, "That waitress. She didn't even blink." His date leaned in, eyes wide. "Do you think he'll fire her?" "Fire her? He doesn't own this place," the man shot back, grinning. Victor heard bits and pieces of it. Every laugh, every hushed voice dug a little deeper. This wasn't just about food anymore. This was about control. And for the first time, he didn't have it. Camille leaned forward, speaking gently. "Victor, say something." But what could he say? That he was wrong? That a waitress, a complete stranger, had just exposed him in a way boardrooms never could? He couldn't even look up. His pride was too heavy, like armor he couldn't take off. Meanwhile, Danielle walked back toward their table with the plates in hand, no tremor in her fingers, no rush in her steps. The woman carried herself like someone who knew storms came and went, but the earth stayed solid. She set Camille's halibut down first, then placed Victor's steak with careful precision. "Filet mignon, medium rare, just as you asked," she said softly. No sarcasm, no smugness, just grace. Victor finally looked up at her. For the first time that night, his eyes really saw her. Not the uniform, not the role, but the person. And what he saw unsettled him. She wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. She was steady, like someone who had been through worse storms than this one. He cleared his throat. You really think I'm not human?" Danielle paused, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I think sometimes people forget, especially when they have the world in their pocket." Her voice wasn't accusatory. It was matter of fact, almost gentle. Like she wasn't trying to destroy him. She was trying to remind him of something he'd lost. Victor sat back slowly, her words echoing in his head. Forget. When was the last time he had a conversation without checking his phone every 2 minutes? When was the last time he asked someone how their day was, without expecting something in return? Camille spoke again, this time with quiet strength. "Victor, you've been running so hard, you don't even see where you are anymore." For the first time that evening, he didn't argue. He didn't snap. He didn't have the energy for it. All he could do was sit there, staring at a plate of food that suddenly felt like the smallest thing in the world. Danielle turned to leave, but Victor's voice stopped her. "Wait." She looked back, eyebrows slightly raised. He hesitated. The man who never hesitated about anything couldn't find his words. Finally, he said, "What's your name?" Danielle tilted her head slightly. "Danielle." He nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory. "Danielle." His voice trailed off, softer now, stripped of all its armor. She gave a small nod and walked away, leaving him to wrestle with something money couldn't buy: humility. At another table, a woman whispered to her husband, "Do you think he's going to apologize?" The man shook his head. Guys like him, they don't apologize. But deep down, even Victor wasn't sure anymore, and the next words out of his mouth would leave everyone stunned. Victor didn't touch his steak, not yet. The aroma was there, the truffle potatoes, the perfectly seared filet, but his appetite had vanished, replaced by something heavier, something he hadn't felt in years: reflection. He glanced at Camille. She was watching him closely, not with judgment, but with a quiet sadness that stung worse than any criticism. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you think she was right?" Camille set down her fork, her voice soft but firm. "Victor, when's the last time you looked at someone without expecting them to give you something?" Her words landed like a punch to the chest. He opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out, because he knew the truth. It had been years: deals, contracts, power plays. That was his world now. Everything transactional. Everything calculated. Camille continued, her tone steady. "You used to care about people, Victor. You used to see them. What happened?" He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. "I don't know. I guess. When everything started getting bigger, I just stopped thinking about the small stuff." "The small stuff," Camille repeated softly, shaking her head. "That's life, Victor. That's what makes us human." Before he could respond, Danielle appeared again, this time with a small tray of condiments and a calm expression that could disarm anyone. She placed them gently on the table, not breaking eye contact with Victor. "Is there anything else I can bring you?" she asked. Victor hesitated, then said something no one expected. "Yeah, a moment of your time." Camille blinked, surprised. Danielle tilted her head slightly but didn't flinch. "Sure," she said, her voice calm. She stood beside the table, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. Victor cleared his throat, struggling for words. "Listen, I was out of line. What I said to you, it wasn't about you. It was about me." A hush spread across the nearby tables. The billionaire, Victor Langston, apologizing. That was rarer than rain in the desert. Danielle's voice was even, but there was a flicker of softness in her eyes. "Thank you for saying that." Victor nodded slowly, but he wasn't done. Something inside him had cracked open, and the words came tumbling out. "You were right. I have forgotten what it's like to be human. Everything in my life. It's numbers, deadlines, people wanting something from me. Somewhere along the line, I stopped seeing faces, just transactions." Danielle didn't rush to respond. She let the silence breathe before speaking. "That happens to a lot of people. Doesn't matter how rich or poor they are. But the thing is, it's never too late to change that." Victor looked at her, genuinely looked, like he was searching for something in her eyes that all his billions couldn't buy. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like the smartest person in the room. He felt like a student, listening to a truth he should have learned a long time ago. Camille spoke softly. "Victor, this is what I've been trying to tell you. You're running so fast, you've forgotten what matters." He nodded slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. "Yeah, I know." Then he turned back to Danielle. "Tell me something. Why did you say that? Why not just ignore me, or call your manager, or, I don't know, quit on the spot?" Danielle's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Because I've been where you are. Not with the money, but with the pressure. The kind that makes you forget there's a person standing in front of you. Someone reminded me once. So now I try to remind others." Victor swallowed hard. He wanted to ask more, but for the first time, he respected the fact that maybe she didn't owe him the whole story. Maybe the lesson was enough. He pushed his plate slightly forward, still untouched. "You just did more for me in 10 seconds than half the people I pay 6 figures to advise me." Danielle gave a short nod. Sometimes the right words don't cost anything. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Victor staring at his reflection in the water glass again. But this time, he saw someone he didn't recognize, someone he wasn't sure he liked. And for the first time, he wanted to change that. But what he did next, nobody expected. Victor sat still for a long moment, the weight of the room pressing on him like a verdict. The clinking of silverware and soft hum of conversation had slowly returned, but for him, time felt different now, slower. He looked at Camille, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't seen in years, hope flickering behind tired eyes. He reached across the table and took her hand. She froze for a second, surprised by the gesture, then gripped his fingers gently. No words passed between them, but the silence was louder than anything he could have said. Finally, Victor pushed his chair back and stood. The legs scraped the polished floor, drawing attention like a spotlight. Conversations died again. Forks hovered in midair, and all eyes turned to the billionaire who, just minutes ago, was tearing into a waitress. Victor cleared his throat, adjusting his cufflinks, a nervous tick he hadn't felt in decades. Then, with a steady breath, he spoke loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Everyone, I owe someone here an apology." Gasps spread like ripples in a pond. A few diners exchanged looks, their eyebrows climbing so high they practically touched their hairlines. Victor turned his gaze toward Danielle, who had just stepped out of the kitchen holding a tray for another table. She froze mid-step, her brows knitting in confusion. Victor walked toward her slowly, the weight of his status falling away with every step. When he reached her, he didn't look down at her like before. He looked her straight in the eye, the same level. "I was wrong," he said, his voice clear, no ego left in it. "What I said to you was disrespectful, and you didn't deserve that. Not for 1 second." A hush swept through the restaurant like a passing storm. People who had been sneaking glances before were now outright staring, phones discreetly tilted under tables, recording what would probably go viral in an hour. Danielle blinked, surprised, then nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said, her tone calm but warm. Victor wasn't finished. "You reminded me of something I've been running from for years, that being successful doesn't mean forgetting how to treat people." A man at the bar whispered, "Did he just apologize?" His date smirked. "And in public? This is better than reality TV." Victor offered a faint smile, not to the crowd, but to Danielle. "If there's anything I can do to make this right." She cut him off gently. "Start with remembering what you just said." Her words were simple, but they hit like truth always does. Clean, sharp, undeniable. Victor nodded, the corner of his mouth twitching as if trying to remember how to smile without arrogance. Camille approached and slipped her arm through his. For the first time that night, her touch didn't feel like a formality. It felt like a lifeline. Victor turned back to Danielle one last time. "Thank you," he said quietly. Not just for the steak, not just for the service, for reminding him that even billionaires need to be human. Danielle smiled, just a small curve of her lips, then walked away to another table like this was just another night. But everyone in that restaurant knew it wasn't. As Victor and Camille sat back down, the steak finally cooled on the plate, untouched. But something else had been served. Something that didn't come with a price tag. Perspective. Because at the end of the day, money buys a lot of things. Power, comfort, control. But it doesn't buy decency. It doesn't buy humility. You have to choose. Respect isn't a luxury. It's the one thing every human owes another. No matter how high you climb, never forget the ground you started on. What do you think? Should Victor have done more than just apologize? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this story hit you, share it with someone who needs the reminder. Because sometimes, the right words at the right time can change everything.